The day my husband left, he didn't even take his toothbrush. That's what I remember. The most, not the shouting, not the tears, not the sound of the front door slamming, but the silence that followed. A silence so sharp it felt like glass against my throat. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, staring at the empty space in the closet where his jackets once hung, the faint smell of his cologne, cedar, and citrus, still floating in the stillness like a ghost refusing to leave. I didn't cry, not then. Instead, my hands trembled and I leaned against the wall, realizing that heartbreak isn't loud. It's quiet. It's the absence of footsteps and the untouched toothbrush and the indentation left on a pillow. And the cruelest part? He didn't leave for a stranger. He left for my best friend. But before everything fell apart, life was simple, ordinary, peaceful. I used to wake to the warm smell of fresh coffee and the hum of the old refrigerator clicking in rhythm like a heartbeat. I worked as a primary school teacher, and I loved the routine. The small hands holding crayons and the innocence that filled the classroom. My husband, Daniel, was a civil engineer, steady, thoughtful, gentle, and we built a quiet life together in a small apartment with pale blue walls and wooden floors that creaked near the hallway closet. Every Friday we made homemade pizza, half pepperoni for him, half spinach and olives for me, and spent evenings laughing at old films until we fell asleep on the couch. Back then, the world felt safe. At the center of it all was my best friend, Clara. We had met in college, and she was everything I wasn't. Loud, dramatic, full of neon-colored laughter and stories that filled every silence. She walked into rooms like light exploding through a window and made people feel seen. Special, chosen. She was family to me, more than family. When she introduced me to her brother during a Christmas dinner years before, I met Daniel, she whispered, "You two are meant for each other," and I laughed it off. But when Noah walked into the room with his gentle smile and soft voice, I felt something shift. We dated for a time, parted peacefully when life took us different directions, and years later when I met Daniel, Clara stood beside me as my maid of honor. She held my veil as I cried happy tears and promised we'd grow old raising children who called each other cousins. I believed her. I believed everything she ever said. So when she arrived at our door one rainy Tuesday night, mascara streaked down her cheeks, suitcase in hand, whispering, "Can I stay for a while?" I didn't hesitate. I hugged her, told her our home was hers, and helped her move into the guest room. At first, her presence felt like a spark. The house was full of laughter again. Loud music while cooking, late-night stories over tea, and Daniel seemed to enjoy the sudden liveliness. She teased him, complimented him, nudged him into conversations, and he laughed more than I'd seen in months. But slowly, things began to feel off. She started sitting in Daniel's usual chair at the table, leaning over him unnecessarily to reach for dishes, dressing up even when staying inside, wearing perfume thick enough to fill the hallway. Sometimes I'd walk in and see them sitting too close, shoulders touching, laughing at something on his phone. They wouldn't hear me right away. I once stood there in silence, waiting, invisible. And when they finally noticed me, Clara grinned and said, "You wouldn't understand this kind of joke," flicking her hair back while Daniel smiled softly, almost apologetically. Something tightened inside me, small, sharp, uncomfortable, but I swallowed it. They were the two people I trusted most, and trust, I believed, was the backbone of love and friendship. But trust is also the easiest rope to put around your own neck. The signs were quiet at first, her lingering hand on his arm, her too loud laughter at his smallest joke, the way they exchanged glances like they shared a secret. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself real betrayal always arrives with thunder. Never tiptoes in wearing lipstick and a smile like honey. I was wrong. And the moment everything cracked, the moment I could no longer lie to myself, was already on its way, crawling closer each day like a storm no one sees until lightning strikes the ground. I wish I had listened to the warnings. I wish I had trusted the tightening in my chest. Because soon, the people I loved most would tear my world apart. And I would learn that the deepest wounds don't bleed. They suffocate. The night when everything truly began to change, looked completely ordinary from the outside, a quiet Saturday evening with rain tapping softly against the windows. Daniel was in the kitchen cooking pasta, something he only did on special occasions, and Clara was laughing beside him, wearing only a silk robe and moving around him far too comfortably. I sat at the dining table pretending to read while watching them share private jokes and whisper like they were alone in the world. When she leaned over to taste the sauce from the spoon and her lips brushed his hand, something inside me stung sharply, not jealousy, but recognition. I tried to act normal, cleared my throat and walked closer, but every time they said we, it felt like a knife twisting deeper. Later that night, after forcing myself to stay calm, I found myself alone in the bathroom gripping the sink, staring at a version of myself I barely recognized, whispering a question I was terrified to ask. Is something happening between them? 2 days later, while preparing lesson plans on the sofa and hearing the shower running, Daniel's phone buzzed beside me. I never checked his phone before, but this time something inside pushed me. The message preview froze my heart. Clara, I miss you. When can we talk alone again? With shaking hands, I opened the chat and found dozens of messages. Late-night conversations full of emotional intimacy and hidden meanings. The words felt like knives. She's too sensitive. You need someone who understands you. And Daniel's reply, I didn't mean for this to get complicated. I felt the air leave my lungs, my vision blurring as the ground shifted beneath me. My best friend and my husband were speaking about me like I was the problem in my own marriage. I dropped the phone and buried my face in a blanket to muffle the sound of a broken, wounded cry escaping from me. Moments later, Daniel walked out of the bathroom, smiling, asking if I was okay, leaning in to kiss me, but I turned my face away, forcing a calm lie. Just tired. That night I lay beside him listening to his peaceful breathing, wondering how someone could sleep so easily with betrayal resting under his skin. While across the hall, Clara paced restlessly like guilt had legs. I stared at the ceiling for hours, feeling something inside me crack but not shatter. I decided in silence that I would uncover the truth on my own terms, not with screams or chaos, but with patience sharper than any blade. Betrayal thinks it wins, because the betrayed stays quiet, but silence is not surrender. I would wait. I would watch. And when the truth surfaced, I would be ready, even if I had to face it completely alone. The morning after reading their messages, I woke before both of them, sitting quietly at the kitchen counter with a cup of coffee that had long gone cold, my hands wrapped around the mug just to feel something solid. I watched them come downstairs, one after the other, both acting so casual, so normal, like there wasn't a storm hanging over us. Daniel kissed the top of my head lightly, almost absent-mindedly, and Clara stood near the hallway mirror fixing her lipstick, humming softly like she owned the air in the room. I noticed everything now. The way their eyes met a little too long, the way she laughed at his simplest comments, the way he found small excuses to stand near her. It was like watching two people speak a language they thought was invisible. But I didn't confront them. Instead, I became quiet, observant. Betrayal has a smell. I don't know how to describe it exactly, but it's like metal and smoke and the heavy air before a thunderstorm. I felt it every time Clara touched his arm. I felt it every time he defended her too quickly. One afternoon, she offered to help fold laundry, and I watched her pick up one of Daniel's shirts and press it to her face for a second too long, closing her eyes like she was inhaling a memory. When she noticed me standing there, she flinched and let it drop, forcing a laugh. He just uses really strong detergent, she said. But her voice trembled and her eyes darted away. I said nothing, but inside I felt something shift, my fear slowly turning into a cold, quiet certainty. Days passed, and tension settled into the house like dust. At night, Daniel would turn his back to me in bed, typing on his phone under the covers, the glow lighting up the wall. I would lie staring into the darkness, my heart beating so loudly I worried it might wake him. I began to track their patterns, not because I wanted proof anymore, but because I needed to understand the size of the lie I had been living. One day, I left my phone recording on the hallway shelf before going out for groceries. When I returned and listened, I heard their voices. Soft at first, then clearer. Sharp like broken glass, Clara whispering, "She doesn't even notice anything. She's so naive." And Daniel sighing, "I just don't know how to tell her. I didn't mean for this to happen. But I can't stop thinking about you." I sat, perfectly still listening to their words, twisting around my ribs like thorns. And then Clara's voice, light, confident, poisonous, said, "You deserve someone who actually understands you, Daniel. Someone who fights for you, not someone who clings and holds you back." They laughed together, a sound that felt like knives in my spine. That was the moment something inside me went still. Not broken, not hysterical, just frozen into clarity. I realized the worst part wasn't losing Daniel. It was losing the version of myself that trusted so blindly. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just pressed stop on the recording and placed my phone gently on the table. If they thought I was weak, then I would use that. If they believed I was unaware, I would let the illusion serve me. I would not confront them yet. I wanted them to reveal themselves fully, publicly. Betrayal thrives in secrecy, but collapses under light, and I was ready to turn on every light. The next week unfolded like a slow, painful performance, each of us pretending not to notice the fractures spreading beneath the surface. Daniel started staying out later, claiming work deadlines, but he returned smelling of a perfume I didn't own, sweet and heavy, like gardenias trapped in humidity. When he walked past me, the scent clung to the air, and it took everything in me not to recoil. Clara, on the other hand, became bolder, slipping into rooms whenever Daniel was there, brushing past him just close enough that her hand grazed his back. Sometimes I caught her watching me with a strange mix of pity and triumph, as if she had already won a battle I didn't know we were fighting. But I stayed quiet, letting them think they were hidden. I started documenting everything. The messages I already captured, the recordings, the growing evidence, not because revenge tasted sweet, but because I needed proof for the day my truth demanded a voice. One evening after dinner, Daniel announced that his sister, our only close relative nearby, was coming over for a small gathering the next week. He wanted us all together, he said, like a family. His voice shook slightly and Clara's smile tightened, like she knew the risk of too many eyes in one room. That night I sat on the porch alone, listening to the distant hum of cars and the wind chimes, brushing against each other like whispered warnings. I watched the stars, wondering how long broken hearts could keep beating. The day of the gathering, I dressed with deliberate care. A soft beige dress, minimal makeup, hair brushed neatly behind my shoulders. I wanted to look steady, unshaken, dignified. Clara, however, came down the stairs in a red dress far too elegant for a casual family dinner, her perfume overwhelming the hallway. Daniel couldn't look away from her, and the sight nearly knocked the breath out of me. His sister, Maria, arrived carrying a bouquet and a warm smile, unaware of the war quieting beneath our skins. We sat around the dining table, and for a moment everything looked normal, plates clinking, soft laughter, wine being poured. But then I saw it. A look passed between Daniel and Clara, one they didn't bother to hide. A look full of unspoken promises. Maria noticed. Her gaze flicked between them, confusion darkening her eyes. And that was when I made my move. Calmly, without raising my voice or trembling, I placed my phone on the table, pressed play, and let the recording from the hallway fill the silence. Their voices spilled out, Clara mocking me, Daniel confessing his feelings, the two of them laughing about the woman sitting just inches away from them. The room went still. Maria's hand froze around her wine glass. Daniel's face paled. Clara's lips parted, but no words came out. The sound of their cruelty echoed around us. And when the recording ended, I lifted my eyes and met theirs with a calm that wasn't weakness. It was resolve. Maria was the first to speak, her voice low and shaking. "Daniel, tell me that isn't real." He opened his mouth, but no words came. Clara reached for him, whispering his name, but he pulled back like her touch burned. And in that moment, watching their world wobble, I felt something inside me finally exhale. I wasn't broken. I was awake. Daniel sat there with his hands trembling against the edge of the table, his eyes darting between me and Maria like a man drowning with no direction left to swim. Clara tried to regain control, straightening her shoulders and forcing a shaky smile. "Okay, yes, we got close," she said, her voice thin and desperate, but only because she neglected him. "You don't know what it's been like living here." Her words hit the air like poison, and for a moment the silence pulsed so loudly it was almost physical. I looked at her, really looked, and saw not confidence but panic. Maria's face twisted with disbelief, and when she spoke, the disappointment in her voice cut sharper than any scream. "Clara, you brought yourself into their marriage. You moved in and tried to destroy your own brother's home." Clara's expression crumbled, her mask slipping. She opened her mouth as if to argue, but Daniel finally spoke, his voice cracking. "Stop! Just stop!" Everyone froze. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling like the weight of his choices finally struck him all at once. "I don't even know who I am anymore," he whispered. "I let something ugly get inside me. I let it ruin everything. For the first time in months." He looked at me directly, and I felt the sting of tears warming my eyes. "I'm so sorry," he said. Not defensive, not angry, just hollow with regret. But apologies don't stitch back torn skin. They don't erase fingerprints from wounds. Clara shoved her chair back abruptly, the legs scraping loud against the hardwood. "You're pathetic!" she spat at him. "Don't pretend this wasn't what you wanted." She glared at me then, a twisted bitterness darkening her eyes. "You were too easy to beat." The words punched the air out of my lungs, but before I could respond, Maria stood up so fast her chair nearly toppled. "Get out," Maria said sharply, pointing toward the door, her voice shaking with fury. "Before I throw you out myself." Clara's face flushed a deep red, part rage, part humiliation, and she stormed out, slamming the front door so hard the windows rattled. The house was silent again, but this time the silence was heavy, not tense, but grief-filled, like the quiet after a funeral. Daniel sank into his chair, covering his face with both hands, his shoulders shaking. Maria walked around the table and placed a hand on mine. "You don't have to stay," she whispered. I nodded, not because I was weak, but because I finally understood. This wasn't my battle anymore. I stood, and Daniel stood too, reaching for me like a drowning man grabbing at anything solid. "Please," he whispered, voice broken. "Don't leave yet. We can fix this." I stepped back. "You should have thought about fixing us before you destroyed us." His face crumpled, tears slipping onto his palms. I walked past him slowly, gently removing my wedding ring and placing it on the table, a quiet, final surrender. Maria followed me to the door, squeezing my hands with a silent apology that wasn't even hers to give. When I stepped outside, the air was cold and sharp, the night sky wide above me. For the first time in a long time, I felt something different move inside my chest. Not pain, but release. I walked to my car, closed the door gently behind me, and sat there in the quiet, breathing in the freedom I had earned through fire. I drove away without looking back, and the farther the house disappeared in the rearview mirror, the lighter I felt, as if I was driving out of smoke and into sunlight. But endings are never really endings. They're beginnings disguised as goodbyes, and mine had only just started. I spent the next few days in a small rented Airbnb across town, a quiet place wrapped in tall pine trees where the air smelled like rain and wood. I turned off my phone for 24 hours straight, letting silence settle into the spaces where grief used to roar. When I finally powered it back on, messages flooded my screen, dozens of missed calls from Daniel, long paragraphs begging for another chance, short, frantic ones saying he couldn't breathe without me, voice recordings full of sobbing apologies. I didn't listen to most of them. Not because I wanted to punish him, but because I didn't want to break again. But there was one call I answered, Maria's. Her voice was soft but tight with anger and exhaustion. "Everything's blown up," she said. "Clara told everyone in the family that you ruined her life, that Daniel led her on and threw her away." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Of course she did." Maria took a breath. "But no one is believing her." I showed them the recording. I leaned back against the headboard, closing my eyes as relief washed over me. Not happiness, just a quiet validation. Thank you, I whispered. You didn't have to. Yes, I did, she cut in. You deserved someone on your side. She went on to tell me that Clara had been kicked out of the shared friend groups, blocked by half the family, and had shown up drunk at Daniel's job demanding he defend her. Daniel had to be escorted out by security after shouting in the parking lot, accusing Clara of destroying everything. Their affair wasn't a romantic dream, it was a sinking ship. And both of them were scrambling for air. I listened in silence, not feeling triumph, just closure. Later that evening, when I decided to step out and buy groceries, I ran into an old neighbor from our street. She approached me slowly, concern in her eyes. I heard about what happened, she said gently. I'm so sorry. People are talking, but they're all on your side. For a second, I stood there speechless, absorbing the weight of her words. Not scandal, not shame, support. As she walked away, I realized something important. I hadn't lost everything. I had lost people who were never mine, and I was finally noticing the ones who remained. The next morning, Daniel showed up at my rental house. He stood outside in the cold rain, knocking until his knuckles were red. I watched from the window, heart aching but steady. When I finally opened the door, he looked small, wet hair plastered to his forehead, eyes swollen. I'm getting help, he said immediately, as if racing time. Therapy. I don't even recognize myself anymore. I never meant to hurt you. I need you to know that. His voice broke. But I didn't. I wrapped my sweater tighter around me. I believe you're sorry, I said quietly. But sorry can't rebuild? Something that's already burned down. He took a step closer, reaching out. I love you. I shook my head slowly. If you had loved me truly, you would have protected me. The rain fell harder, drumming on the porch roof like applause for a scene ending. After a long moment, he lowered his hand, looked down and whispered, I'll sign whatever papers you send. There was no anger left in him, just acceptance. He walked back to his car without another word. And when he drove away, I didn't cry. I just stood there, breathing in the cold air, letting it settle into my bones like the beginning of a new season. I thought I would feel empty, but instead I felt wide open. Like a field after a storm, wreckage around me. Yes, but also space for something new to grow. The next few months were a quiet rebuilding, like learning how to walk again after forgetting my own balance. I filed for divorce, and true to his word, Daniel signed everything without a fight. We communicated only through email, short and practical, nothing more. I packed my things from the house while he stayed elsewhere, and the silence inside those walls felt like a ghost of the life I once had. It echoed hollow and cold, but no longer frightening. I found a small apartment with big windows that filled every morning with sunlight, and I spent afternoons sitting by the glass, letting the warmth rest on my skin like a reminder that life continues. Always. I went back to my old hobbies, painting, hiking, cooking simple meals that made the house smell like rosemary and fresh bread. I reconnected with friends I had slowly drifted from and discovered how good it felt to laugh, without thinking someone was watching or judging. Slowly, piece by piece, I remembered who I was before heartbreak tried to erase me. One afternoon, while grocery shopping, I bumped into a woman from my old workplace who had heard bits of the story like everyone else. She hugged me hard and said, "You're stronger than what happened to you." I didn't cry, because for the first time, I believed it. Healing wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was in small choices. The way I made my bed every morning. The way I stopped checking my phone constantly. The way I could look in the mirror and see a whole person instead of a broken one. And one ordinary Thursday, standing in my kitchen drinking tea, I felt something shift deep inside me. I wasn't grieving anymore. I was growing. Later that week, Maria invited me to lunch. And when I saw her, she looked lighter too, free from the chaos that once wrapped around all of us. We talked for hours. Not about the past, but about the future. "You deserved so much better than what they gave you," she said gently. And I smiled, not wounded but grateful. "I finally know that," I replied. She told me Clara had moved out of state after burning every bridge behind her. Daniel had stayed in therapy, trying to rebuild himself. but he never tried to contact me again. Maybe he learned something. Maybe he didn't. Either way, it was no longer my burden to carry. I drove home from that lunch with the windows down, spring air rushing in, messy hair whipping around my face, and I laughed, loud and real, because I wasn't pretending anymore. That night, I wrote something in my journal. I am not who they broke. I am who I rebuilt, and for the first time in a long time, I felt proud of myself, not for surviving, but for choosing myself when staying would have destroyed me. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need validation. The universe had delivered consequences without me lifting a finger. All I needed was peace, and I finally had it. If there's one thing this journey has taught me, it is that betrayal doesn't define you. Your response to it does. I spent so long believing I wasn't enough, believing that if I had been prettier, kinder, more exciting, maybe Daniel wouldn't have looked elsewhere, and maybe Clara wouldn't have seen me as someone she could step over. But the truth is, someone else's disloyalty is never proof of your inadequacy. It's proof of their character. Losing my marriage and my closest friend felt like the end of my life, but it was really the beginning of a truer one. I learned that walking away is not weakness. It is power. That forgiveness does not mean reconciliation, it means releasing the weight that was never meant to be mine. And I learned that healing doesn't happen all at once. It happens quietly, in the moments where you choose peace over chaos, dignity over revenge, self-respect over begging to be loved. Now, when I look back, I don't feel anger anymore. I feel gratitude for the strength I didn't know I had, for the courage that carried me through nights I thought would never end, and for the chance to rebuild my life on a foundation that's mine alone. There is life after heartbreak. There is joy after devastation. There is love after loss. Even if the first love you rediscover is the love you owe yourself. And to anyone listening who has been betrayed, abandoned, or blindsided by the people they trusted most, you will rise again. You will find yourself again. You will be whole again. Sometimes the people who break us are the very ones who free us. Tell me, if you were in my place, would you have walked away too? If my story touched you, share your thoughts below. Your voice might be the strength someone else needs today. And if you're still healing, I hope you stay long enough to witness your own comeback. You deserve that and more.